Good morning or afternoon, everyone. We're going to wait a couple of minutes before we get started, but thanks for joining. For those who are just joining us, welcome. We're going to wait just a couple of minutes past the hour to get started. Zoom has this great new feature, I'm sure that many of you have noticed, where you have to admit everyone in from the waiting room. So I am manually adding everyone as they're joining, so we're just going to give them a couple minutes to get everyone in. All right, I'll keep admitting people as they join, but we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our fall TPM NLN National Learning Network webinar. Hope everyone has been doing well. Today we have some exciting announcements for you all, and thank you to those that are putting in the chat as well. It's great to be together. We're going to go ahead and kind of walk through some of our kind of general updates and announcements. We'll talk about some of our upcoming events, what we've been doing as far as the new curriculum enhancements that are going to be coming out soon, and what we've done as far as resources. And then, of course, some of our newest kind of TPM endeavors and general workforce endeavors that you all might be interested in, and then updates to the web tool. So just a few kind of updates from the TPM land and academies that have been going on this year. Since we've all last met, we've completed the Kentucky's second academy, as well as Texas, which just recently completed this month. So congratulations to both of those states for their academies. We also launched our TPM Academy of Idaho. So we have some new people in the TPM family who I think I saw a few of them on this call as well. So welcome to your first National Learning Network webinar. And of course, we're going to be launching our final academy for the year, which is going to be an additional national cohort, fully virtual online. And that will start in November. In addition to that, we've released 2 curriculum extensions or resources, one in CTE, which we spoke about earlier in the year, and that's all about developing better partnerships between our educators and our employers and how to kind of leverage that to build better CTE programs and pathways for students. And most recently, we released our Opportunity Populations resource, both of which are available on the tpmacademy.org website. And we'll dive deeper into the Opportunity Populations resource at our Fall NLN Summit, which will occur on the 26th. In addition to that, we also have Talent Forward, our annual workforce conference. We're going virtual this year, and that will be on October 30th. So we highly encourage you to register for both the summit and for Talent Forward. And just a quick reminder for our National Learning Network surveys, everyone should have received an email, hopefully, from yours truly, asking you to fill out this brief survey for us. We're looking to do a longitudinal study on the impact of TPM in your communities and what we can be doing to help better support that work. So if you haven't had a chance to fill that out, or if you did not receive an email from me, please either email me if you haven't gotten something, or if you could fill it out, we'd be greatly appreciative. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to Bob Sheets, our fearless half of the TPM curriculum creation and brain trust, and he's going to talk to us about all things TPM curriculum and the enhancements that we're looking to do in the next edition.
Thanks, Nikki. Just what I like to do is just go over what we've really done in the curriculum updates largely is to integrate a lot of the additional material we developed in the CTE and the opportunity population work. And then we address some other recommendations people had in improving the curriculum. So let me just highlight them step by step, or at least strategy by strategy. Starting with the orientation, again, we tried to highlight the benefits of the tapping into the opportunity population talent pool. We also dealt with those providing support services as playing a critical role as a provider of service for employers and employer collaboratives. And again, we tried to emphasize the idea of addressing multiple objectives. I'll go over that as we move down on the dual bottom line approach to basically integrate goals and objectives around for employers, and also how to deal with diversity, equity, and inclusion objectives as part of TPM. Again, integrating many of the things we learned through the opportunity population work. And we move to strategy 1. Again, the idea is to reinforce, put a little bit more emphasis on one possible set. We remember we had those different pain points, challenges, talent management challenges, and we're just putting a little bit more. We're putting more emphasis on that, on the one we used to call diversity, Now we're calling it diversity, equity, and inclusion, and trying to build that up more and actually add more content there to give it more of a balance in terms of, again, the talent management challenges as possible pain points in strategy 1. If I go to the next, and I'll be happy to take questions right after we go over these. That's okay. Or put questions in the chat if you have them. Number 3 is, again, trying to continue the theme on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The idea is addressed in a more, we had a little bit in there on unintended bias or disparate impact. So now we just kind of strengthen that area with the idea of go through and analyze your hiring requirements and really get down to validated hiring requirements and try to at least be cognizant of efforts to remove bias and reduce disparate impact whenever possible. And so that's basically, again, a theme that we mentioned that from the beginning we're trying to integrate throughout the strategies. And on strategy 4, we had a recommendation on encouraging people to really analyze the community context in which you work and in which you can look at untapped labor pools, especially with opportunity populations. But the idea is to do an analysis of the characteristics of your workforce as context setting and build in, if you all remember, we encourage people to identify other programs that may be potential suppliers that are in related areas to the targeted jobs, your critical jobs you've targeted. So we're trying to introduce, just like we did in strategy 2, look at the ways in which government has different ways to categorize programs, like they categorize occupations, and how to do that analysis. Put that in there, and then really emphasize the idea of using talent. We're calling it talent pool analysis now, as addition and added on to talent flow analysis to basically identify sources of untapped talent. So that was the recommendations we got to really improve strategy 4, and we're working on that. Go to the next slide, Nikki. Again, we're trying to continue that theme about diversity, equity, inclusion, and making sure it's throughout all the strategies. And we've identified, so again, as you see in the bullet points, really talking about understanding the targeted populations more in factory, where to start. We also are emphasizing more about how to align your employer-facing metrics with other government, community, and social impact measures, especially on when your providers are under different metrics and different incentives. The idea is to align those better. The biggest change, which is a new unit in strategy 5, many of you all had recommended, it's great to have continuous improvement on strategy 6, but let's get out in front of it. Let's kind of identify, when we design a pipeline, let's get in there and really understand the risks for failure that we already have, and kind of design up front how to manage those risks in a more proactive way that complement continuous improvement after the fact. So what we've done is we've taken tools basically from Lean Six Sigma, that's failure mode and effects analysis, as well as risk management tools from supply chain management and risk management tools, and kind of put them together. We're calling it risk assessment and management. The idea is to identify risks of failure in your pipeline up front, figure out how to monitor them and manage them to mitigate them as a preventative measure, and then that complements later in strategy 6 continuous improvement. So that's the biggest change in of strategy 5. The other one on strategy 6 is we had that, if you remember, we had this idea of kind of focus on things you have control of, but we got feedback, and it's great feedback on, but it's possible for you to partner with others to manage causes, root causes of any sort of performance problems that may be beyond the control of the collaborative, but you can work with other players in your community to address those. So don't disregard them. Just figure out what you need to do as a partner that's a partnership that's led maybe by a different organization or coalition in your communities. And then we're just trying about the data sources you collect to get better information from partners. And then, of course, we want to basically still work on that ROI thing. And the idea is to factor in, include possibly in the future, or at least address social impact issues. So anyway, that's kind of a quick overview of the curriculum changes based on your all's recommendations. Any questions, comments, things we missed?
Feel free to unmute yourself or to type in the chat if you have any questions or comments.
Bob, it's Deb. I would just say bravo. That hits on many of the things I know folks in Minnesota were coming to me as the TPM person, really challenging me on how TPM was going to get more intentional with this. So thank you.
No, I said thank you all for actually giving us a great insights, especially the people who worked on our opportunity population work as well as the CTE one, but also you all that gave some great comments on how to improve. We encourage you all to make additional suggestions. Send your email to email Nikki or others, and please, we need your input so we can make this better. And we want to make it so that from comments from the people actually doing the work is most important to us.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you so much, Bob. I believe now I'm going to turn it over to Jason to give us an update on TPM Next and to introduce talent finance.
Great, I just want to confirm you can hear me, right, Nikki? Okay, good.
We can.
All right, so 2 goals. I'm going to be a little lighter on TPM Next, just going to give you the facts and then when you can find out more. And then I'm going to share a plethora of slides with you on talent finance. But know that while the slides are voluminous, they're there for you as a resource. So don't feel like you need to read every word on them. Just pay attention to the voiceover and just know you will have this deck that you can go back and kind of dig in at your own pace. But we just want to kind of give you everything we have right now. But first things first, TPM Next. So I think pretty much everyone on this call has heard us talk about it, about this in the past. We've been kind of messaging around this for the better part of a year now. And basically what TPM Next is all about is the future of how we learn TPM. And we want to move to a new platform that will allow us to do more virtual engagement, provide more remote learning opportunities, but to really leverage technology in ways that accomplishes 2 big goals. Number 1, it helps scale the movement. And we want to be able to have a delivery platform that will allow us to reach, I think we've trained now over 400 people. In the time it took us to train 400, we want to be able to train over 4,000. So we want to significantly scale now through technology, but then also while scaling, professionalize TPM. How do we really tighten it up and create a more agile learning platform that allows you as practitioners to really up your game and get the recognition you so richly deserve? So in order to design, TPM Next is an official brand or anything like that. It's just been kind of our little R&D name we've attached to this project. But what we've done this year is we've kicked off a series of design sessions that have been facilitated by a human-centered design firm called SweetRush, who has worked with over 24 partners now over the past few weeks and months to bring together a group of existing TPM practitioners, current TPM learners, future TPM learners, as well as our TPM fellows, our core TPM team here at the Chamber Foundation, as well as some new partner organizations that have come to the table. That includes SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management, which is very interested in integrating more of the TPM movement into their HR and talent management networks, as well as ASEM, which is the Association of Supply Chain Management. And ASCM is kind of the global professional association for supply chain practitioners. And they want to engage with us so we can become the leading global organization that oversees talent supply chain networks. So we want to learn from those that we've kind of picked, borrowed, and stole from, and make sure when we talk about talent supply chain management, it is a recognized supply chain practice within the supply chain community. And we also want to talk to some credentialing and technology experts who know how to manage credentialing platforms and how to do it effectively, who know how to leverage technology to expand learning opportunities. Anyway, the point is we brought a party together. And this party came together to really contribute a lot of ideas facilitated by SweetRush to get at what is the core design of TPM Next. If we're going to build it, what's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? What's the user experience going to be like? And then what are the technical specifications around achieving that vision? What do we technically need to do to build a platform to achieve that kind of user experience? So that's what we've been up to. The good news is we are nearing completion of that design process, and we'll be reviewing the final results in the coming weeks. So we've moved fast and furious, and we are going to be well positioned to potentially launch something as early as next year. There are 3 component parts to TPM Next, as we've discussed it today. I call them the pillars. The first one is a learning management system. How do we make sure that when you want to come and learn TPM, you don't have to open up a giant textbook, pull up a giant PDF, or attend an in-person or remote academy experience? And what we want to do is provide learning on demand that could be more subscription-based, where you as a TPM member could come and access all the learning modules in a web-based environment and can learn at your own pace, which we call asynchronous learning, or to engage in synchronous learning with others. So we are hosting additional academies, additional cohorts, and you could opt into them. You could take refresher courses. We just want to make as much available to you online as possible. And instead of kind of having to go through strategy by strategy, we could break them up into learning experiences and course modules with all kinds of multimedia content. So we're trying to just make it a much more interactive and engaging experience, a more on-demand experience, and more opportunities for you to connect with the learning and to provide updates to that learning. And we think we need a customized learning management system to bring those capabilities to you. Next, we want to build a credentialing platform. We want to make sure that you have opportunities to not only learn it, but demonstrate that you know it in a high quality way and actually implement it and get recognition for your implementation. So what that means is we want to start introducing endorsements and certificates and other types of micro-credentials into the TPM movement. So we are professionalizing your skill set. So you can actually have a digital badge or a micro-credential in talent supply chain practices. And you can have a badge that demonstrates that you've gone through an academy and you know your stuff. But we can have a different set of badges or credentials offered through a peer review process that says, not only do I know it, but I've done it and I've done it well, and my peers have signed off on the evidence of my success. So we're trying to build in that credentialing platform so you as practitioners can now become credentialed talent supply chain professionals. And then lastly, we want to build in an application layer. Many of you make good use of our TPM web tools. We want to put those on steroids now. So we want to make sure we're always improving our web tools, but we are creating more of an open application marketplace where other partners could come in and provide their own tools, whether they're tools that are consistent with the practices called for in the curriculum, or value-added tools, meaning I've already built a talent supply chain and it's working quite well. And here's a whole bunch of other partners who have a lot of other tools that could be added to your mix to really take your game to the next level. They don't have to be one-to-one with the curriculum. It just says, if you have a talent supply chain, these are other vendors, products, and tools out there that could really help get you to that next level. So we're trying to figure out how we can better streamline access to our tools, other people's tools, and other types of vendors or partnerships, but make that really a customizable experience based on the needs of your community in your pipeline. So that's what TPM Next is. We're not just talking about it, we're doing something about it. We've gone through these design sessions. Your peers have weighed in, and we are going to be sharing the findings of that process very soon. We have our next large TPM summit in a couple of weeks on October 26th, where we'll provide this update again, maybe even share a little bit more concrete products that came out of the design process, but we also have a big announcement. So that's my teaser. I'm not going to give it away just yet, but you're going to want to show up to the event because you're not going to want to miss that announcement regarding TPM Next. So that's that. I did want to ask any of my peers, Nikki, Bob, or Joe Quick, all of which have been participants in these design sessions, if they want to say anything about this before I move on to talent finance. shaking his head.
The only thing that I would say is, you know, Jason mentioned that we did have TPM practitioners participate in the peer review process, and thank you to everyone that did. And I think that having you all there has helped ensure that we're building a platform and a learning journey that really is going to represent the best possible outcome for people who do this in a virtual setting. So I'm really excited for everyone to get to see what came from that as well. And I think we learned a lot about TPM in general from this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, recognizing, you know, all the practitioners and, you know, other partners that came to the table, some of the things that came up that I think I never would have thought about with regard both to delivery and, you know, what's kind of most important to the network about the way that things are currently delivered and what, you know, how that can translate and be, you know, further enhanced and strengthened by these new delivery methods was pretty exciting. So it was great to hear from everyone throughout the process.
And another capability I want to just flag is, you know, we're adding these curriculum updates kind of periodically, but it's really by the sweat of our brow and based on the feedback you all give us. And we're trying to do these curriculum extension projects, but with a learning management system like this, I think we could really start adding more learning and content faster. And we could start actually outsourcing that more to members of the network or other professional organizations that want to sponsor their own electives or course modules consistent with our core curriculum. So we can start bringing in other organizations to sponsor new course modules to really start doing a wide variety of extensions and to do it maybe even better and faster than we've been able to do it in a more manual way. So we think there's a lot of opportunities here, but we have to start somewhere. It's going to be a long road to achieve the TPM Next vision, but we will be placing some key flags in the ground very soon in getting this process underway. And thank you again to everyone who's participated in those design sessions. We always say this is your movement, not ours. And it was really critical for us to get a lot of different practitioners and voices in that room to kind of tell us, if you're going to do this, this is how you could build it in a way to meet our needs. So we really do appreciate and value that feedback. So more to come on that front. Moving along, we wanted to share the next thing with you, which is talent finance. Hopefully some of you have heard of this already. This is the latest initiative offering of the Chamber Foundation, but it's one that's been done in partnership with the Greater Houston Partnership, who you should all know from our TPM network, one of our original pilot sites, and Peter Beard, a TPM fellow. He was a co-author of this initiative. Bob Sheets also was a co-author of the white paper. We also have partnerships with Working Nation, as well as with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. So a lot of groups kind of came together around this, but what I want you to keep in the back of your mind, and I'm going to remind you along the way, is talent finance is essentially a spin-off of TPM. And much like we've done JDX and the T3 Innovation Network, it's our hope to kind of create a space for talent finance to kind of incubate as its own brand and to get really focused on a set of topics and challenges it wishes to tackle. But the end game is to back it all into TPM when the time is right. So we want to kind of create this little R&D space for talent finance. So we're going to go through what it is and why it's important to you. And then I want to conclude with talking about where there's intersections with TPM and where a group of the ready and the willing can join us from TPM in talent finance to really be the tip of the spear and to explore this space so it can be a value add to the parent network. But when it comes down to what we're doing in talent finance, what you see on the screen is essentially what we're advocating for. Is we fundamentally believe that we need a new public-private approach for how we finance and invest in talent. And we need an approach that's fit for our time, our economy, our labor market, not one that was built for the past. And we think this is really critical, and we'll tell you why. If we go to the next slide. Again, this is where the slides get a little text heavy, but don't get overwhelmed by them. I just want to call out a few things. A lot of consistent messaging with TPM. We know we are still struggling with a growing skills gap. And we know that skills gap is only getting exacerbated by the new economy, where skills are changing faster, lead times are growing longer, costs are off the charts, but we know it's a problem that we need to reckon with. And what I'd like to argue is that unless we get down into the incentives themselves, we're not truly going to change the talent marketplace. And while we have been doing God's work in many respects in terms of trying to improve signaling, communication, and partnerships, we're all in it together, and TPM and JDX and the T3 Innovation Network. What we're arguing in this initiative is they will only go so far unless we take on the fundamental issue of changing the incentives in the talent marketplace, which will ultimately change behavior and outcomes. So we think these are good things, but now is the time to activate the third rail. We're in TPM, we're changing how we engage employers and how we change practice on the ground. In JDX and T3, we're changing the data and technology tools we use to improve signaling and how we connect in the talent marketplace. Now we need to change how we finance and invest in talent. And if we get that third rail underway, we think we can create big systemic change across the talent marketplace. Now is the time to talk about how the money moves. So next slide. We have a few other challenges I teed up. A lot in TPM, we talk about upside opportunity. And by that, I mean it's education, training, and credentialing pathways. How do we create better alignment and how do we get them funded? In talent finance, we're talking about those upside opportunities and how we invest in them, but we're also introducing downside risk management tools. So not just how we invest in continuing education and credentialing, but how are we using a set of tools within our talent pipelines to now manage the new and changing risks of this economy. And that includes issues that face employment and income, which can be dislocation from a job, reduction in earnings, but it's not about just managing and investing in upside opportunity. In the new economy, we need a new toolkit for how we manage downside risk when it comes to employment and earnings. It's both at hand, and we need to start baking that back into TPM. A lot of you are aware of the data and technology work we've been doing. We've been talking about that data and technology work in the context of how to improve the learning environment and labor market. But now what we're saying is that same data infrastructure is going to fundamentally transform how we think about financing, investing, and underwriting talent pipelines. And it can be leveraged in ways to help better steer employer and private sector dollars. And then last and most importantly, why we need talent finance is we need to get at the issue of incentives, because if we don't, we're not going to see the kind of improvements when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion that we're all hoping for. And if we want a more equitable talent marketplace, it's not about leveraging the old playbook, it's about leveraging a new playbook. And it's not just about partnerships, it's how we move the investments in capital and financing that's actually going to create more equitable opportunity across the talent marketplace. So those are some of the reasons for why we believe now is the time. But now let me get into more of the mechanics of what talent finance is all about. Big thing is we released a white paper similar to TPM. It started with a white paper in 2014 and it led to a movement that you're all now part of. We're trying to recreate that playbook and we're starting with a white paper. We need to set the terms of the debate and we encourage you to go look that paper up. You can find it on our website. We have the link here. But what it does is it introduces a new framework for how we should all understand the finance ecosystem when it comes to education and workforce development. And we introduce this framework to show you the full universe of those who actually issue financing products and those who benefit from them. And we try to really demonstrate what the employer lanes are, where employers are issuers of financing products and services. And those can be issued to education and training providers, other employers, or they can be issued to learners and workers themselves. But we need to understand the full menu of opportunities where financial innovations can take hold and what the employer role is across them. We also introduced guiding principles. I'm going to show you those in a second, but we're not talking about any kind of finance innovation, but those innovations that adhere to a set of guiding principles that will get us towards better outcomes for learners and workers. We also introduced recommendations. So if you remember back to our TPM white paper, we had lists of recommendations for education and training, for employers, for government. We did something similar here and we laid out 16 recommendations on where to start, starting with what we need employers in the private sector to do differently, and if they lead, what the public sector do to better enhance and incentivize how employers invest, but align and braid their investments too. So it's not public sector leading, but where can the private sector take ownership and lead for how we underwrite talent pipelines, and then how can the public sector really better support them and align with those private sector investments. And then we talk a lot about the enabling infrastructure. I'm going to show you a slide that goes into more detail there, but it's not just about the finance innovations, it's also about the enabling infrastructure that allows them to scale. So if we want more finance innovations, we need an infrastructure to support them. We highlight 27 examples across this paper. It's full of examples that say by these 16 recommendations, what do they look like in practice? We give you 27 examples to show you what we mean. And then of course, we're issuing a call to action. Similar to TPM, we are a network of action in all things. And we want to make sure we're not just talking about talent finance, we're doing talent finance. So we are going to start laying out plans for how we can move from concept to pilot to scale. And pilots come next. But do read that paper. It's a bit longer than some of our other pieces, but it's because there's so much good stuff in there. And this really is kind of the culmination of about 8 years of work that we've been engaged in. And it took us to do TPM and to do these other data and technology projects to get to the point where we can have a very different conversation for how we finance and invest in talent. Here's the definition we're using, in case you're wondering. Again, we're talking about the development and use of public and private instruments for how we align investments in talent development, but for downside risk and upside opportunity, both and. So how do we invest in training and career pathways and credentialing pathways, and how do we make sure those who are on those pathways can manage the downside risks of the new economy? And in guiding principles, you should see some stuff that we know a lot about in TPM: public and private, shared value and risk creation, making sure that, here's another big one for TPM, that the finance instruments we use expand choice for learners, for employers to work with the providers that make the most sense to work with them. So give them, the finance product should follow the choice and should follow programs that are affordable and fair, that are producing good outcomes, and we have data to back up which programs produce the kind of outcomes that should have access to more alternative financing opportunities, that we are very transparent and accountable, another key TPM theme, that we are empowering workers, giving them the finance solutions that best meet their needs to activate the pathways to get the best outcomes for them, and the same for employers. And accessible, we talk a lot about large companies and how they're leveraging finance innovations to get their stuff done. But what about small to mid-sized companies? We need a new set of tools for how small to mid-sized companies can also access new financing opportunities to build their talent pipelines. And we want to start designing finance solutions for them. So it's about empowering workers and providing more accessibility to financing solutions for employers. And of course, we want to make sure we're doing all of this with an eye towards equity, because we want to make sure alternative financing and alternative solutions are activating opportunities that were not there before for a wide variety of opportunity populations. So some guiding principles to set the guardrails for how we want to design these finance innovations and test them. Next slide. I mentioned we introduced a framework. This is going to be too small for you to look at, but if you go to page 22 of the document, you could dive into it. It's not meant to be comprehensive. It's just a way for you to organize your thinking about all the types of financing products and innovations that are out there, and who's taking the lead on issuing them and who's benefiting from them. But we wanted to create a new way of organizing this space to say, this is how you should understand all the different financial service products, how you should understand the grants, loans, and tax treatments that government offers. But it's not just an inventory, a list, it's a framework for how you organize who issues what to whom. And we're trying to map this to say, let's find where the gaps are, where innovation can take hold, but where some of these innovations can now be popped together with other ones for more robust and comprehensive public-private products. But we need a framework to get our approach organized so we can isolate which innovations with which partners. And we think this framework is a step in the right direction. Within the framework, we talk about more traditional investment types like grants and loans, but we also talk a lot about emerging financial innovation like income share agreements or equity-based financing, career impact bonds, outcome-based financing, how to use TIF dollars differently, how to better leverage new business models like staffing agencies or last mile training, where apprenticeship fits in, talking about new employment income insurance products. But we're trying to organize a full universe of products and services, but trying to surface a lot of new ones that are emerging that employers need to know more about and need to actually incorporate as part of their toolkit. So we're trying to define not any one of them, all of them, and how they can be combined in new and innovative ways to get really good work done. Next slide. I mentioned it's not just about the finance innovations, but it's about the infrastructure that supports them. Here's some examples. We know that if finance innovations take hold, we need to change how employers account for their investments. So we need to look at human capital accounting and make sure they are never disincentivized from investing in talent, but always rewarded for investing in talent. And I know a lot of us are in this space and know that investments in talent are often reported as cost or expense, not as R&D or an investment. So we need to change that. So let's do it. Next, we need better quality assurance system based on the outcomes employers care about. So if we have alternative financing, we need alternative quality assurance that sends the right signals that these programs get the outcomes that we're looking for and should have access to alternative financing opportunities. LERs and data infrastructure, LERs being learning and employment records. We are going to produce a new data infrastructure that tells us more about where learning occurs and what outcomes than ever before. That could be leveraged to fundamentally transform how we invest and underwrite talent pipelines. We'll know what to invest in, who to invest in to get what kind of outcomes, which means we can negotiate far better deals and mitigate or reduce risk in the kind of financing solutions we activate. We need a new risk infrastructure. We assess, identify, measure, and score risk all the time in the financial services sector, but we've not applied that same toolkit when it comes to human capital. And we've often done that because we don't want to prevent access to programs, but I think we've had it all wrong. And in this paper, we flip that and say, no, how can I help you as an individual manage your long-term education and career success if I don't recognize, identify, and assess the unique risks you face? And how do I score it? And by scoring it, how does that then activate a toolkit for me to reduce, mitigate, or transfer your risk in ways to better guarantee your success? The way we've been doing it has been perpetuating inequity. With a new risk infrastructure, we can actually start addressing and solving for a more equitable talent marketplace. And then this is a big one for you all. Employer networks are part of the infrastructure of the future, where employers are gelling together, coming together in collaborative. That creates joint procurement and purchasing opportunities, which means those who are selling finance innovations right now are doing it on a company by company basis, and it's preventing their ability to scale. Where our networks have come together, much like through associations like chambers, groups of companies can now jointly procure healthcare plans. Why not jointly procure talent finance solutions? So we think we have a joint procurement opportunity in front of us that could fundamentally change how we activate finance solutions with our employer collaborative being the tip of the spear. And then lastly, of course, state and federal policy alignment. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to jump ahead and share a couple more things with you. We did a series of forums over these past few weeks. They're all online on YouTube. You can look them up. You can use this link to find them. Most of them are about 60 minutes. The first and the last one are 90 minutes. But if you want to hear from a set of VIPs and speakers who are really digging into these issues and talking about why it's important to them and why it should be important to you, we encourage you to go back and look at those if you didn't have a chance to join us in person. Next slide. Some things that are coming out later this month, we're going to release a digital magazine that's going to be include excerpts from the paper, but include multimedia content. So if you don't want to read a 60 to 70 page paper, you can look at excerpts and listen to interviews and look at other animations and stuff that explain the concepts of the paper. We're also going to be releasing a survey, possibly as soon as this year, but it might be Q1 of next year, where we are going to be working with SHRM to actually gauge employer appetite for testing new finance solutions outside of their existing training investments in tuition reimbursement methods. We want to give them a whole new toolkit, but we want to always check their pulse. How ready are we in this new era to try new things? Next slide. Here's a big one for you. What's in it for me? Why TPM matters. This is an extension of TPM. What it does is it builds off strategy 5 and asks, how do we finance your talent pipeline? And then it gives you tools for how to do it. So we want to make sure financing isn't somebody else's problem, but it's part of your solution set. And we want to plan a curriculum extension that adds finance into the TPM framework itself. Not just co-designing the learning, it's co-designing the financing solution and making sure it's creating shared value and shared risk where employers have skin in the game, but could also derive benefit. Next, we think employer collaboratives are uniquely positioned to now be finance collaboratives. They can activate new finance innovations where a lot of times we have third parties offering income share agreements or they're being offered in one case by a workforce board or by a university itself. Why can't we have a collaborative in Phoenix, a collaborative in Tampa, a collaborative in Kentucky, creating their own employer-backed ISA account and leveraging public investment, third-party investment, and actually financing and having an equity stake in their own talent pipeline and getting returns on that equity stake. We'll invest in our workers and we'll benefit from that investment. And if somebody poaches over their leave, we'll still be able to recuperate some resources. So we want to think about how employer collaboratives can be repurposed in this way. And we'll get back to that. I mentioned this could add new revenue streams for our employer collaboratives, which can be really critical to our long-term success. And in phase 2 of Talent Finance, we will be reaching out to you because we want to know who's ready to pilot something. And we want to start doing new demonstrations using some of these new finance innovations with TPM employer collaboratives. So we need the ready and the willing to step up and engage in some experimentation so you can now not just build your pipeline, you can finance and invest in your pipeline and imagine how that's going to impact the responsiveness of your providers and others. Who pays matters. And if the employer collaborative is paying, you're going to get better results and better responsiveness. Last slide, I believe. Last slide. Contact information. You know how to reach me and Bob. Sarah Castro from the Chamber Foundation team is our lead staffer on this. Hopefully you'll get a chance to meet her. She is supported by Chief Etheridge on our team. And we do have, of course, Peter Beard, who needs no introduction, is part of this, and some of our other partners at Working Nation, the Federal Reserve Bank. We encourage you to get in touch with us. Talent Finance is a natural extension of TPM, and we hope to work with a subset of our TPM partners to experiment with some of these finance innovations so we learn from it and we could bake it into the TPM framework and academy experience. I know I went a little over time there, but I'd invite Bob or Nikki to say anything else before we open it up and move on.
Nope, no comments from me, Jason.
None for me either, but if there are any questions from anyone, be happy to take those as well.
Yeah, and I know I went a little over, so I'm also happy to just take questions in the chat box while we move on to the next part of our agenda. Does that work for you, Nikki?
Yep, that's great. Next on the agenda is an update on the TPM web tool with Olivia Miller from SIU. Olivia, I'm not sure if we can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, so we will go ahead and jump right in. We do have quite a few updates available this quarter. So the first update we have up here is we recently pushed out preferred provider updates that allow users to better define those preferred providers by identifying statuses, start and renewal dates, types, additional notes associated with each preferred program. Next slide. New pages were also created to assist users with managing and maintaining those preferred provider statuses so you can easily track when renewal dates are approaching. Next slide. We also created a page to define our preferred provider criteria on a host organization and collaborative level. The criteria identified will then appear on the collaborative specific TPM web pages so that information can be made publicly available as needed. Next slide. We also pushed out updates to our needs assessment survey to minimize the number of clicks needed to complete the strategy 3 portion of that survey. All of our drop downs were replaced with radio buttons. Next slide. Updates were also made to our business functions to allow users to better sort through the SOC code data that can get pulled in when associating critical jobs. Additionally, users can more easily search and add competency and employability skill statements. The modal was updated to merge the two tabs and provide buttons to allow you to determine if you would search or add the text that you entered. Next slide. We also made updates to the TPM web tool invitation process so that users can identify the name and email address they want the TPM web tool invitation email to appear from. This mimics the process that we have been using for sending those TPM surveys. Next slide. We also have introduced test checkboxes across our host organization, collaborative, and business pages to allow users to identify which items are being created as a test. This test checkbox will allow the TPM web tool to more easily calculate the operational and test items to better gauge the active operational items we have in the TPM web tool. Next slide. We have also made extensive updates to our performance dashboard. Users can now easily establish measure sets for more than one business provider or program at a time. Additionally, measure sets can be built out with additional definition or description information, and we can associate users to our aggregate measure set rows. Next slide. The target measure set data associated with each of those measure sets was also updated to include term information so that we can identify if our measure sets are long-term or short-term. And we also updated the list of frequency options based on feedback we've collected during a couple different feedback webinars. Next slide. We also made some updates to our value stream map tool so that we can include provider and tier information as part of that value stream. Next slide. The scorecard was also updated to align with the performance dashboard updates, so the rows could be pulled in to reflect that aggregate data as well as the individual business-specific measures. We also made some updates to the trend rows, so those are now color-coded with our red, yellow, and green, similar to the relative to goals circles. Next slide. The scorecard was also updated to pull in additional information associated with each of those measure sets. So users can now see collection data as well as user data when reviewing the scorecard. Next slide. Perfect. So in order to streamline the data collection process for our performance dashboard, we created a performance dashboard survey. This survey allows business administrators, collaborative administrators, and host organization administrators to provide performance data via the TPM Performance Data Survey. Host organizations and collaborative administrators can set up the performance dashboard surveys using performance dashboard measure set data. After establishing a performance dashboard survey, the web tool is going to use an automated process to resend out those surveys as needed based on the frequency that was identified for each measure set. Our host and collaborative administrators are going to get notifications 7 days prior to any email, or I'm sorry, get email notification 7 days prior to any survey sending so that any changes can be made to that survey prior to it going out. And then anytime performance dashboard data is submitted, it will then be used to automatically update that performance dashboard and the scorecard with the most relevant data point. This strategy 5 step-by-step guide was updated and is available in the TPM library if you're wanting to, walk through the new survey when you have time. And last slide. Just open things up to any questions if anybody has any questions specific to those web tool updates.
Any questions for Olivia?
Awesome. You all can check out the TPM forum or Slack. Every time we push out updates, we make posts there, and we also include documents that contain screenshots of what those updates look like to kind of help you better navigate them as you're getting familiar with them.
Thanks, Olivia. I know there's been quite a bit of discussion happening in the chat, but if there are any additional questions anyone has on anything we've covered today, or things they'd like to share with the network, please feel free to unmute yourselves. Jason or Bob, any final words for the network?
No, I'd love to get some reactions from folks on talent finance. I'm not sure if some of you were able to join the forum series, or if you're hearing about it for the first time. Just would love to get a pulse. Safe environment. Any feedback is welcome, constructive or destructive. So just would love to get a sense. Interesting. Is the connection to TPM clear? And I know that was kind of a rapid fire presentation. It was a bit of a fire hose. Intrigued, troubled, concerned, anything at all. But just love it to get a couple reactions from the group to see how we can improve how we talk about it, or how we might need to think about it differently.
Well, Jason, it's Deb, and admittedly, I don't have the experience of many of my colleagues in this room right now, but I was already anticipating we're about to get into that supply side body of the work and looking at the preferred providers and all the different strategies that the various employers we're working with already have executed upon. Some of them have talked to Dolly, some of them, they've all got different funding sources they may or may not have pulled on. So to me, having not done this part yet, but it really seems to address what I was thinking could be an issue. Once you get the preferred providers identified, then how are you establishing the right levels of investment and financial commitments to an ongoing sustainable process that you can continuously improve? So again, I'm not speaking with experience, but it certainly seems to hit the mark.
Yeah, just to give you a couple examples, these finance companies are now finding us, and they're finding out about the work you're doing, and they are hungry to meet you, hungry. We have one group, they're called Meritize, and they offer what might be considered a traditional kind of loan program, private loan program. But what they do is they want to work directly with employers to say, let's mitigate the risk and understanding the pipeline you're drawing from. And let's go in and offer better deals to those learners so they don't have to take out a federal loan, which you can't get rid of. And it's going to have, I would argue, an unnecessarily high interest rate. And they could come in and say, we'll beat the federal rate, and we'll set it up as a benefit program for the employer So they will make contributions towards paying back their loan so long as the individual comes and works for them. And if that individual leaves, you stop making the payment against the loan. So now that is costing the employers money, but it's guaranteeing the talent and at a cheaper rate. So now you're saying, why should you come to my program? We're going to give you a better financing option to get your training and talent, and we're going to subsidize, if not cover, your loan payments so long as you stay with us. Now, when we said, well, what if I had, Jennifer, forgive me for using the Phoenix example, what if we had 60 cybersecurity companies that wanted to create a shared benefit plan operated through the Phoenix Chamber? And they could come in and say, so long as that talent pipeline works for any of these companies, we'll make a commitment to pay against that loan. And they can move around the companies, but if they leave the collaborative, then they have to take responsibility for your loan. And they were just like, that would save them that would make far better deals for them and give them far more negotiating leverage. And they're like, we'd have to have 60 different conversations. You're telling us we can have one? And we could even offer better terms to the learner. They were just like, we can't believe it. This would change how we do it. And the same thing with those who are pursuing income share agreements and others who say, instead of doing this as a one-off with a learner or institution, we could run it through the employer community, and the employer community can help manage it or invest in it. And imagine if you were, I'm just making stuff up now, but let's say you had a collaborative in Chicago, and employers wanted to build an account through a collaborative and put a third of their dollars or build up a third of it. And then you had government come in or philanthropy come in and say, we'll cover the other third. And then you were operating within a TIF district and said, instead of the money going towards a beautification project, how about a portion of those TIF dollars go towards the employer ISA fund? And now we come in and we completely purchase the education, training, or credentialing of our pipeline. So you come into our pipeline, work for us, we will pay for your education. We'll take an equity stake in your long-term earnings up to a certain amount and up to a certain number of years. And we could subsidize it so long as you work for our collaborative. But if you get poached, you leave the collaborative, you leave the state, we have an insurance policy, meaning we're still getting 5% of your earnings coming back with every paycheck to replenish our fund. It's just a set of conversations we haven't happened. And there's dozens and dozens of these innovations that can be out there. It's just we focus so much on the learning and the signaling and the partnering in TPM. And now we want to introduce the finance. And you all know I like to come up with cheesy sayings. The one I've been trying to get traction on with this one is, if you change the incentives, you change the talent marketplace. It's all about the incentives. And we're very light on the incentives, not in a bad way, but we want to supercharge the incentives discussion, because we think when you take employer collaboratives and make them data collaboratives and then make them finance collaboratives, the amount of leverage you will have is something that we've never seen in this country. So we think now is the time, and it just took 8 years of building to this point, because absent employer collaboratives and TPM and absent emerging data infrastructure, we could not have this conversation that we're having about finance now. Anyway, I'm just on my soapbox now. So entertain any other questions, or Bob, if I said anything that made your skin crawl or something, I encourage you to.
No, Jason, I think you ought to also highlight that employer collaboratives was one of the highest priorities given in the capstone forum among the talent finance stakeholders. They thought that was the #1 priority to pursue, putting together employer collaboration with innovations in talent financing. They thought was the way forward. And so we hope many of you will be interested in becoming test beds for how employer collaboratives and financing innovations come together.
Maybe Bob, if I could put you on the spot to talk a little bit about the upskilling components, because it's not just about the new pipelines, but there's all different ways employers who are currently managing employee benefits could do it better with new financing strategies, both for upside opportunity and downside risk management. So Bob, could you just take 30 seconds to maybe talk a little bit about those?
Well, yeah, it's one in which we were highlighting in the white paper. Encourage you all to look at that. Is there's many different ways for employers to pool together their upskilling money that can be provided through government incentives as well. So think of it as pooling training money for upskilling, as well as doing it through employee benefit plans like tuition aid. And we're also talking about how employers could deal with even the downside risk management through financial wellness programs that correspond to equivalent government income and employment support services. So I think we're trying to come at this from a public-private lens, but again, it's all going to turn on the power of employer collaborative purchasing. It's the purchasing power of employer collaboratives that's going to transform talent finance.
Yeah, if you look at the paper, lots of examples of lifelong learning accounts, new concepts around income insurance products, new outsourcing benefits, all these different ways where we don't have to use the old playbook. And if we're just relying on tuition aid and reimbursement, nothing wrong with it, but it's the old way. And there's all different ways of doing it now. And we can use TPM as a vehicle to educate our collaboratives and give them access to these new tools of action. But I think someone was trying to speak up.
It was me. I was just going to say there's been a lot of conversation in the chat box, and really appreciate you all taking the time to go through talent finance. And I got a couple private messages from some people who are interested in kind of being those test beds. So I think you're definitely seeing interest in the network, and there's a lot here for people to get involved in. So I want to be mindful of time. It is almost 1 o'clock. We can definitely link the talent finance report. So we'll send you a link to the report to register for both the NLN Summit and our Talent Forward events on the 30th, and to our most recent resources. But thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again very soon.